Hi, I'm Jess.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
And this is Rediscover, a conversation where we travel through everything that makes up the essence of who we are and how to live authentically and imaginatively.
Here, we invite you to join us as we explore and discuss a little bit of, well, everything.
From Disney to cultivating your most authentic life to deepening your relationships and talking about the real stuff.
We hope you'll find this a space that speaks to you, encourages you, and brings a little bit of magic into your day.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jess.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
And welcome back to this week's episode of Rediscover. Welcome to the month of May, which is going to be a really beautiful month with a really beautiful theme. We are dedicating this month to all things childhood, motherhood, and that really pure time of life.
Yes. So we are going to talk a lot about the mother-daughter relationship dynamic this month. We're also going to talk to some of our favorite moms. But this week, we really wanted to kick off the month of May by kind of dialing it back all the way to the beginning. And we really wanted to dedicate an entire episode to talking about the concept of being childlike versus childish, which, if you've been around here for a while, is something we talk about pretty regularly. You may have noticed that every time we interview a guest on Rediscover, we ask them what their take on this concept is. So we thought it was important enough to dedicate an entire episode to. It's definitely one of the pillars of this podcast and something that is very integral in Jess's and my life. So we are going to dive in.
There's a difference between being childlike and childish. It refers to the presence that children have and the way that they see the world and how wholesome it is and how they come into this world as these pure light beings and they're able to just be and observe the world from this blank slate. There's so much beauty in that. And as adults, as you all know, we all grow up and take on layers upon layers of things from society or family drama or traumas or just beliefs that we picked up from people, even if they're unknowing, like if it's about scarcity or if it's about anything along those lines. So childlike is really stripping down back to that purity and getting back to the authentic truth of who you are as like a being and a soul and just the inner child that always lives within you.
Yeah, I think the word complexity comes to mind. Just the older you get, the more, like Jess was saying, the more layers of complexity we kind of receive. And some of it's without even asking, and it's sort of subtle. And so we adapt and we just go with it and we just get caught up in this tidal wave. And, there's financial stress and, like you said, family stress and trauma from the past that we haven't dealt with because we're too busy and school and relationships and sickness and death and these like really tough realities that come with adulthood that you aren't really ever fully prepared for. And in trying to contend with all of that and kind of like keep everything at an arm's length and to sort of like do this like Elastigirl move where you bring some things in and some things got to give. And in all of that, we tend to lose these pillars of our childhoods that are actually so necessary to hold on to as adults. And I think, I'm going to go out on a limb here, are the keys to longevity and happiness and overall contentment. And if you were listening to our Cultivating Happiness episode, a lot of this was probably interwoven throughout that. But I really think that when Jess and I talked about being childlike, we kind of broke it down into these like 4 unique concepts. So that's where we're going to begin.
One of the main points of being childlike is engaging in wonder. Like I was saying a little bit before, they come into this world and everything they see is just pure excitement and pure wonder. They'll see a flower, they'll see a puppy, they'll see rain out the window, and it's just this awe-inducing experience to see something so new and so different. And as we grow older and become adults, those things become normal to us. And I think it's a beautiful experience to be able to strip back to those roots of being surprised and delighted by these things. And I think especially that relates to like nature or like animals, like anything like that that's just natural, like a natural part of the earth. So I think being able to observe the wonderment again, even if it's just really small things, it just opens up a whole new space for cultivating more appreciation and gratitude in your life.
Yeah. Yeah, we just have all these distractions now. We have a computer in our hands at all times. We have our phones, and so many times I'll find myself, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this too, walking around somewhere outside or on the beach or wherever I am, and I find that I'm just like looking at my phone, and I sort of catch myself, and I'm like, "Oh, look up, Kristen." And it's just this automated thing, and we look down, and there's emails and texts and things unanswered, and it's just so hard to engage. And we'll get into that more a little bit later, but I think that wonder, like you said, it really is all around us all the time, and it's often simple things that we have taken for granted, like a thunderstorm, or some wildflowers growing on the side of the road. The simplest way to really tap into it is just to allow yourself the time and space to appreciate those small things and allow yourself to be filled with awe. We had talked about earlier, and if you guys listen to our very first podcast episode, Growing Up Disney, we will link it for you if you haven't. We talk about being raised on Disney and being raised in this like imagination culture, right? Where, when we'd travel to the Disney parks, we would be confronted with wonderment and awe everywhere. And it's sort of cultivated for you, right? You don't have to do a lot of the work. You don't have to really look for it. But the natural world is the same way. If you think about it, maybe it's more subtle. Maybe it's less neon or colorful or,
staged,
but it's still there for you, like you said, to tap into. And it happens every day. And I think we lose a lot of that as we get older. And I think if we can tap back into that, I think we'd be more fulfilled. I think we'd be a lot happier. And I think we would be a lot more connected with the world around us, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think this is just coming to me now as you're talking about that. But I think that is a huge reason why I focus so much on travel. Like I almost rely on travel a bit to tap into my wonderment, which is great because when you do go somewhere new, yes, you are in this new place. Your imagination runs wild. What's it like to live here? What's going on in this coffee shop? What's going on in this building? Like, how was this created? And, your mind just goes to all these imaginative places, which I think is really beautiful. But then there's also the flip side of that, where since traveling constantly is not something that a lot of us do all of the time, being able to take that experience of when you are in somewhere that like externally is somewhere new, like taking that same concept and implementing it wherever you are, I think is the most like childlike thing you can do, and start thinking about it in places of your own hometown. Like I think there's a lot of buildings you might pass every day, or a lot of like streets that you never go down, and just things like that. And being able to tune into the wonderment again and be appreciating where you are and finding those stories, whether they're within your heart and in your head, or maybe finding out more like of the history of a place that really opens you up and contributes to that wonderment.
Yeah. Yeah. What about that place that you travel captivates you? When you're in a coffee shop in a new town, pay attention to the sounds and the sights and the smells, and then realize that there is a coffee shop in your own hometown that has all of those same sounds and sights and smells. And you can have the same wonderful experience in your own backyard. And it's just a matter of tapping into that. I think engaging all your senses, which we've talked about a million times in a million different contexts, is so crucial. And almost like taking that experience you have when you travel and keeping it with you, keep the memories with you for sure, revisit those in your mind whenever you need to escape, but then take the components that are variable and apply them to the place where you live, or maybe somewhere within driving distance, or maybe, like Jess said, a street you've never driven down, or, a town next to yours that you've never explored. You never know what you'll come across, but that newness element is already like wonderful and exciting in and of itself.
Your inner world is the one that can cultivate that excitement and that joy and like all of those energies that you want to feel. So I think it's really beautiful regardless of where you are.
So the next pillar that I think is the first one that comes to mind for a lot of people when they think about being childlike is the idea of play. Here's the piece about play that a lot of adults get wrong. Play is engaging in an activity without any goal-oriented productivity yield mindset. It is just to do a thing for the sake of doing the thing. Because when you think about a child playing outside or playing in a sandbox or playing on a playground, there's no end game for them. They're just playing to play. They're just having fun. They're very present. They're very engaged with whatever the thing in front of them is. And their imagination is engaged because they are present. I know we both have some ideas about that. So Jess, what is your idea of play? When you think of play, what are you doing?
I immediately go to painting. When I was younger, we lived near a lake. So we would go down to the lake and pick out these rocks and we'd bring them back and just paint them. And hours would go by and it was just so much fun because you would just be creating different flowers and different shapes and colors. And as I got older, like I would start to make them more, artistic as my skills developed. But like when I was a kid, it was just whatever you wanted. I think I always had a very crafty childhood. Like we were always making crafts. Even at my birthday parties, we'd make crafts. Or if my cousins came over, we would make crafts. And anything artistic, I think lights up like the play part of me because that's when I feel most connected to that inner child part of myself is when I'm creating something. And it makes me just so like my heart feels so warm thinking about it. And I think I actually need to tend to that part of myself now. I think I've been neglecting that a little bit and saying I'm going to do it. And I think this episode is just reminding me of how important it is to actually do it and engage.
Yeah, I completely agree. We get so caught up in, I think, our agendas, our routines, our dailiness. I have this at this time and this at this time and whatever. And because we're so schedule oriented, we forget to schedule a sort of intrinsically unschedulable thing because part of the idea of play is like it's supposed to be spontaneous. But I think what we talked about is, some different ways for adults to sort of like remove the jarring element of being so structured in our lives and then being brought this idea of play and being like, oh my gosh, I can't just like go do that. How am I going to do that? Baby steps.
Yeah.
Make a little gateway for yourself. Schedule it if you have to. Literally put it in your planner if you have to. 7 p.m. Paint. Sometimes I just turn on music if I'm feeling like I just have a lot of like pent up energy I need to get out or, adrenaline or whatever. And I'll just make up something. I'll just choreograph something for myself. No one's ever going to see it. It's not show quality, but I'm having fun. I'm releasing endorphins. My cortisol levels are lowering. And I'm just playing. I'm just dancing around my living room like I used to in a tutu and all my dress up clothes as a kid. If you like to bake the thing according to the recipe, but then decorate it however you want. Don't follow a pattern. Don't follow a color scheme. Make it rainbow if you want to. Just sort of give yourself an opportunity to step outside of those rules that you feel like exist. And as an Enneagram 1, you guys, I'm very rules oriented. So this is hard for me sometimes. But it's so freeing. It's so liberating. Jess and I were talking about swimming and how, I love to swim, but I'm not like trying to do laps in the pool at 6 o'clock in the morning. When you go to the pool or the beach with your friends, you're just playing in the water. You're collecting seashells. Maybe you build a sandcastle. Maybe you bury your friend in the sand. I don't know, but you're having fun and you're not thinking about time. I think it's so important to engage in play without thought of what time is it?
When you're able to just engage in this play and not worry about how many hours have gone by, or you or you aren't looking at the clock constantly. You're just there and you're playing and you're having fun. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I know when that happens, it gives me such a high. Like I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I feel so rejuvenated. I feel like I'm connecting back to myself again.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I think when I get a little too rigid and too scheduled, I very much can feel it. Like my anxiety will be more alive. I will feel more irritated.
Mm.
Um, and to recharge, because obviously as an adult, you need to have more structure and more schedule in the society that we live in. But
Right.
when you are able to unplug from that and just be and just play,
Yeah.
it does feel very liberating and empowering and connected, like to yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think being childlike is all about, no pun intended here, guys. I swear it just worked out this way. Being childlike is all about rediscovering your inner child, that piece of yourself that you've lost along the way as routines and schedules and demands of adulthood have kind of grasped you. Just rediscover that person that you were when you ran around, danced around, played around like nobody was watching.
When we're kids, we might be partaking in art. We might be partaking in dance. We might be baking or swimming or doing a sport. And I think a lot of adults look at that and they're like, are you any good? Are you good at this?
Ooh, yes.
Because we live in a capitalist society. Everyone is trying to figure out how to make your hobby or your job your profession and how to
How
make
do you rank? Yeah.
yeah. And it becomes like this competitive human construct. And I think a really important thing to do when you are reconnecting with your inner self and your inner child is to try and take off those layers, because when people bring that up to you when you are younger and before you are aware that you're evolving into this adult, you kind of take it on. You're like, oh, maybe I'm not that good. Maybe I shouldn't do this. Maybe someone tells you like, oh, that career is not really going to sustain you.
Yeah.
And I think that really discourages people from leaning into their talents and their gifts, because I believe at least that the whole point of being on this earth is to tap into your gifts and bring light to the world in the ways that really shine through you. We all have different gifts. Some people are going to have gifts in the medical field or in like being a good argumentative lawyer or something like that, which socially is accepted. But I also believe that like people are so gifted with music and art and all of these other things that often, and writing, that often get looked down upon, quote unquote, because of the way, because of the way society is structured. And I just really wanted to bring that up because I think if you are someone who has a gift that is off the beaten, socially accepted, quote unquote, path, I think it's so beautiful. And I think it's something to look at and lean into. And also don't worry about if it becomes your like life's work.
Yeah.
Do it because it lights your soul up. It becomes your soul's work, and it doesn't need to be full of ribbons and accomplishments for it to be meaningful and beautiful.
And I think as an adult, that looks like surrounding yourself with people who do the same, and surrounding yourself with people who understand the importance of just doing the thing for the sake of doing it rather than putting you down or making you feel less than, for not being perfect at it, which I think we see a lot in like that middle school, high school age range too, which is where we start to lose a lot of our confidence because people start to make comments or outshine us and we get discouraged. So I think just holding on to, I have a friend who was always like, it's not that deep. It's not that deep. It's not. You're just playing. It's not that deep. And if people want to make it that deep, it's usually a projection of their own insecurity rather than something you should pay any attention to.
So I do have a resource that kind of goes along with play that I did want to share with you guys. I don't know where the TikTok went, as you know, most great TikToks disappear into the abyss after you see them. But I saw this girl who did this challenge with herself, and it was called Reconnecting with My Inner Child. I think what she did was she planned out a week of like childlike activities for herself to do, and she made a TikTok of each one, as an example. Each day she would do something different, and like one day she decided to paint, and she just sat down and painted with her inner child, and that meant sitting down, getting all the colors out, and just painting whatever. And it would literally look like a bunch of like strokes on the page, and the color, like it wasn't a shape or anything, it was just colors all over.
So it was modern art.
Yeah, basically. And she was so happy after, and she did a bunch of other activities as intentionally set aside time to spend time with your inner child, because guys, we neglect our inner child and it doesn't go away. Like it's right in your heart. If you've ever done like an inner child type healing before, I know anytime I've done them, like you can even do a YouTube meditation of inner child healing. I feel like I cry every time, because it's such a raw and vulnerable part of yourself, and it's just your inner child just wants your attention. So spending time to play with your inner child is like such a beautiful gift, and it's something you can do whenever.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if it's something as simple as like singing in the shower.
Yeah.
Sing in the shower. Try that. See how that makes you feel just a little bit lighter. And it's just fun. For me, I found a podcast, of course, hosted by Carla Hall. If anyone knows who Carla Hall is, but she has a podcast called Say Yes with Carla Hall. And her whole mantra is say yes, adventure follows, then growth. So you have to say yes to the thing.
Ooh.
Then you have the adventure, and then you see the growth that has been the result of that. But she interviews people who have kind of embodied this at some point in their lives. And there's often a conversation about childhood, being childlike, embracing your inner child. She's interviewed people like Misty Copeland, Kristen Bell, Glennon Doyle.
Wow.
Some really, Jesse Tyler Ferguson, some really just incredible people. And they're just fun conversations to listen to. But these people have like truly evolved and embraced their inner child. And that's how that they've actually grown and thrived as adults in much more unique and wonderful ways. So it's really cool. It's a great resource. We will link it. I think when we ask people on this podcast about this question, this is something that's come up a few times. And it's the idea of trust, and that fact that children are just so inherently trusting of the world around them, of their parents, of their surroundings, of the fact that they can fall and someone will catch them, both literally and figuratively. And it's not until the world presents them with a scenario where that trust is broken, which always happens inevitably at some point, that they start to lose that. And for some children, that happens much earlier in life. For me, that happened very early in life. I had a parent leave, and for anyone who, you know, whose parents have been divorced, who's gone through that kind of childhood trauma, you learn very early on that these people who brought you into this world, like, they're flawed. And so you sort of lose that sense of trust very early on. And as I've gotten older and sort of done some inner work of my own and some self-examination, I've realized like that was a lot more damaging than I thought, or I allowed, because I lost my sense of trust so early in life. How do we get that back in a world that tells us not to trust it at almost every opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, whether it's divorce when you're young, or maybe you lose someone in your family when you're young.
Yeah.
I lost my papa, my mom's dad, pretty young, and he like passed away from leukemia within 2 to 3 weeks out of nowhere. And that was very, very hard. And I think that's always been really hard for me to grapple with, because I do, like, as an adult, like I can sense like I have this abandonment wound that I'm like, where did that come from? But I think it was just the shock of that as a kid. And
yeah,
you know, regardless of if you're a kid or an adult, like loss is hard, whether it be, you know, the person passes away, or if it's just a physical void that someone leaves behind. But I think tending to that part of yourself when you're younger, whether you're a child or just a younger adult, like there's this work that you kind of have to do, and you have to allow yourself to grieve that and get to those emotions in a safe space so you can really like fully process them. I think I saw this somewhere. It's like you can't get past something. You have to go through it. Again, the way that the earth kind of just operates on its own and the body operates on its own, I think that's the way that life flows as well. And because we're humans and we have this consciousness and this free will and this thought, we think that we should be the ones in control, when at the same time, like, we're not.
No, right.
So being able to trust like the flow of life is, I think, a really freeing thing. And it's hard. And because we have this consciousness, like, we're going to feel emotions that are uncomfortable, but when you can get recentered and think, okay, like whatever you believe in, like for me, like I'll be like, you know, God's guiding me, or the universe is guiding this path. And at the end of the day, like, I implement for myself that everything is always working out in my favor. Like, the universe has my back. Whatever variation of that phrase is, I try to implement it. Like, what's meant for me will not pass me. Like, everything is working out for my highest good. And implementing that, I think, is just so important when it comes to trust, because if I didn't have that outlook, the world could be a really dark place. So again, that connects to like when you're a child, like when you're a kid, you're just like, well, everything's going to work out. Like it just will. Like, oh, I don't have dinner on my high chair right now. My mom will bring it to me.
Yeah.
Like that, like just being like, all right, I just trust it's going to show up. So
Daddy will appear.
Yeah.
This is the piece where you can't just try to tap into the before. As with wonder and with play, engaging in those things brings about that childlike experience. But with trust, you can't simply say, well, I'm just going to trust everything like I did when I was a child. It's not realistic because we know too much.
Yeah.
We've seen too much. So how do we do that? How do we trust? And I think, as you said, it starts with realizing that the trust has been misplaced.
Yeah.
We can't trust that other human beings aren't going to disappoint us at some point. We can't trust that other human beings aren't flawed, because they are. And this life will be, you know, occasionally fraught with pain or suffering or sacrifice or disappointment or disruption. But trusting in the fact that I am equipped with what I need to do today. And tomorrow I will be equipped with what I need to do tomorrow. I'm just going to keep putting one foot in front of the other and doing the best that I can. That is trust. That right there is trust. You've done it. Take that a step further. I trust that my story is being written as I'm moving through it. God has got this. The universe is working around, through, above, beneath me, and I within it. And there's hope, right? Hope is, I think, part of trust, because if you have hope, then you can trust everything's going to be okay. I will get the answers eventually. You know, maybe you're walking through a really hard season right now. Maybe you lost your job during the pandemic. Maybe you lost a loved one. Maybe, you know, you moved away and you miss your friends, or whatever it is. Hope that and trust in the fact that you will understand why you're going through this soon. You know, maybe you don't see the full view of it right now, but trust that while you can only see a piece of it, like God sees the full story and is writing this beautiful story that you can't even fathom, like how beautiful it's going to get. And he's just like, hold on, this next chapter, it's going to be awesome. And you just have to hang tight and put one foot in front of the other. I think that's really where we tap back into that trust. And I think there are so many resources with that. I mean, if you are a believer, definitely finding that solace in scripture is amazing. But a book that Jess gave me actually several months ago that I read in like a week, and
it's a good one.
just found so much. I think I was like texting her the entire time, like, oh my gosh. And she's like, yeah, I get it. I already read it. It's called Inner Work. The authors are Matt with 1T and Ash. We'll link it. But it's really just about realizing, again, like we said, these kind of themes of consciousness that we've picked up over the course of our lives aren't actually true or inherent. They are just learned behaviors. Our instinctive behaviors are the childlike things that govern us. So if we tap back into those and don't give the power to the things that we've just picked up, we really do learn how to trust. It's not a very long book, and it's definitely one you're going to want to like write in, highlight.
Yeah, it's weirdly an easy read for being such deep content, because you're going through it and you're like having these mind-blowing revelations, but the actual structure of the book, it's not intimidating. Like you just read through it and it flows like pretty quickly.
It does.
And you get to the end and you're like, oh my gosh.
I have to go back because I feel like I must have missed something because there was too much.
Yeah, I'm sure if you read it like multiple times, you'd always hear something or see something different. Yeah. The Inner Work, check it out. We'll put it in the show notes. That's like one of my top recommendations of books. Our last pillar of our childlike discussion is full embodied presence. And we talk about how important it is to be present all the time on this podcast. You probably hear it in your life if you read any sort of like personal development book at all. But I think presence is one of the biggest keys that a lot of us do need to work on. It's unplugging from all of our devices. It's being in the moment. It's being there, showing up, embodied in your body, being there with your family, with your kids, with your friends, with yourself. I think because of all the things we pick up in our lives, like there's some really tough stuff that humans have to deal with. It's just part of the human experience. And I think we come into these lives so we can experience the full range of emotions. And, you know, now that we're here, we're like, wow, this was a lot to sign up for. But being able to just be present and move through things again and just enjoy the little things, it makes such a huge difference. And I think the concept too, I think mindfulness kind of became a very trendy concept in the past few years, but there's so much goodness within that concept.
Yeah, I think another piece to that is, again, we are going to sound like broken records, Jess. Engaging your five senses. Maybe you go for a walk in the morning and, you know, just thinking of something I did recently. I was home in New York and I was going for walks early in the morning, kind of as a way to start my day. And there's this little brook that goes through this little forest near my parents' house. And I would stop. And at first I stopped because I noticed that the daffodils were coming up, which is always like the first sign of spring in upstate New York is the daffodils start coming up. And I saw the daffodils and I stopped and I was like, oh, wow. And then I heard a blue jay and I looked up and I saw, I'm not even kidding you guys. I saw a blue jay and I was like, oh my gosh, how magical. These bright yellow flowers, this beautiful blue jay. And then I listened and I realized I had almost missed the sound of like the babbling brook and the water as it was moving. And then there were other birds chirping that I started to notice. And then I noticed a breeze come along and it was really kind of chilly but it felt good. It felt kind of cleansing and liberating. And then I noticed that the wind made this rustling sound in the trees. And I realized if I hadn't stopped to look at these daffodils, I would never have noticed any of the rest of that, because it's only when you stop and you get grounded and present that those things start to reveal themselves to you. So, and it was such a gift. It was like the best part of my day. That whole rest of the day, I was just in an excellent mood. And I really think that is part of it. It's stopping and listening and looking and breathing and just engaging with all of the things that we as human beings have the privilege and gift of being able to tap into. All of our senses are what cultivate meaning for us. And I think that's huge with being present, and kids don't forget to do that because they don't have something to get to. They don't have an alarm that's going to go off. They don't have to pick someone up or get dinner on the table. So I think that can be just absolutely transformative. I think being present, if you're going to start anywhere, I'd say start there and the rest will sort of start to follow. But I think it was also important to save for last because it is like, to me, the most impactful piece, but also the one you're going to want to work on first. So
it's a practice.
Yeah.
That one is not, oh, I'm just going to be present now.
Like, I'm going to paint today. No, it's really a practice. It's a habit you have to form. And once you formed it, the idea of play and the natural inclination to be in wonderment and your ability to start to build trust will flow from that presence. But that's the thing we want to be top of mind, I think, as you leave this episode and move about your Tuesday. Try to be present and then come back to the other pieces and see how you can grow in them.
Yeah. I think I also saw this great thing on TikTok again. I feel like I get a lot of enlightening TikToks come up on my For You page, but someone was saying they started looking at the world like things were happening for them. So like, for example, when you're saying, oh, I saw a blue jay, like thinking, oh, wow, like the universe sent me a blue jay. That is so cool. And like, once you start looking at it like all these really little but magical things are happening for you, you start observing more. Like, oh my gosh, the sun just shined right in my window this morning just for me, just to wake me up. And not in like a self-centered, selfish way, just more in an appreciation way. Like, wow, that's really cool and amazing. And I think that's a really cool way to look at it. Because then you're just in more of like a giddy state. Like you get excited and everything's a surprise and delight. You're like, oh my gosh, this parking spot is perfectly right in front of where I need to go.
Princess parking. Like, yes.
The more excited that you are and the more appreciative that you are, the more you attract those things to you. Because
that's so true.
This past year, it's been, a crazy year and we've spent a lot more time at home. But in doing so, we found all of our old videotapes from when I was a kid and got them converted to a digital space now so we can actually watch them. And I'm so grateful to have some time to be able to do that. And I've been sitting down with my mom and my dad and watching these videos from my childhood. And they're videos I haven't seen in 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding when I say the first time I watched them, I sobbed for like the entire night because you just watch yourself as a kid and you see this embodiment of light and excitement and joy and presence and all of the things we just talked about, the wonder, the trust. And like I'd open a present on my birthday and I'd scream like, oh my gosh, it's an Ariel dress. I love it. Or just running around in the yard and like my brother would act out playing baseball. He would be the pitcher and the batter and the catcher and the guy on the bench. And you just
the guy on the bench.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's amazing. And you just watch firsthand this childlike spirit. And it's you and it's your family. And you're like, this lives within me. This hasn't left me.
Yeah.
No matter what you go through, no matter what life throws at you, that little child and that spirit that you came into this world with is within you. And that was an incredible realization for me. And I think I spent time like grieving that part of my life because I just miss it. I miss the carefree nature. I miss the quiet minds. Like there was no anxiety and no, like there wasn't as much like fear and angst and all these things that you just pick up. And I think it's just a really great way to recenter and reconnect with yourself. So if you have videos, home videos, not everybody does, but if you do, I think an amazing practice to reconnect with your childlike self is to just go watch them and just appreciate just the joy that radiates from you as a kid, because it's like,
because it's you.
It's you. That's what it comes down to is that child lives within you. I mentioned this briefly before, but if you ever have the opportunity to do an inner child type of meditation, or if you ever go to therapy and parts therapy, where your therapist kind of takes you into a meditative state and talks to different parts of yourself, a lot of times they will talk to your inner child and things like that. I think there's just so much healing within that, because you're really reconnecting with the purest part of yourself, and you're able to bring that more, you're able to comfort that part of yourself and bring that happy, like childlike spirit to the forefront. So
yeah, it's super powerful to revisit some of that stuff and see where, you know, where you've lost it, how that's actually limiting you and your ability to live the fullest, most beautiful life possible. So as you go today from here, from this place, from your car, from your walk, wherever you are, try to be present and engaged in your life in every sensory way possible. And then from there, try to pick up on where you're sensing the wonderment come back, on where you feel in awe of your dailiness, of where you might find time to schedule some play, of where you might see opportunities to trust in yourself and in the greater, more beautiful plan and story for your life. And I think you'll find that being childlike is not childish at all, and is actually the key to living your best, most beautiful life. So on that note, thank you so much for being here, everyone, and indulging our childlike spirits all this time. This was really very, I think, like healing and rejuvenating for me too. So
I was going to say healing, like my heart center feels very glowy right now.
I feel lighter. Yeah.
Yeah. I hope that you're able to implement it into your own life too, and tend to those parts of yourself that may have been neglected over the years, because I think that really is where a lot of healing can take place, or just a lot of play and a lot of fun and joy, if you are already keeping the childlike spirit at the forefront. So thank you so much for listening. It is such an honor to be here with you every week. And next week, we are so excited to continue on with the month of May. Get ready, because it is an amazing episode. It's emotional. Bring your tissue. Yeah. Especially if you love a good mother-daughter relationship, it's going to be a really great episode.
Yeah.
So come back next Tuesday.
These are going to be really, I'm just so excited. They're so beautiful. I'm so excited for next week. Grab a blanket and some tissues, curl up with us. It's going to be so heartwarming. So we will be back next Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern, as always. And we hope you have a wonderful week full of play and wonder and all of the things to bring out your inner child.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And we'll talk to you next Tuesday.
Bye.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Rediscover.
Please subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening. Your reviews are what keep us going, and we'd love to hear from you.
Join us every Tuesday for a new conversation, and let us know what you think we should talk about next.
Follow us on Instagram at positively.kristen and at jessicafay508. And check out Jess's blog at theroadjesstraveled with 1l.com.
Until next time,
stay frumpy.